Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Visiting extra-dimensional beings while having an out-of-body experience. Be me working in remote Australia. Working 100-hour weeks for a fly-in fly-out piece of shit job. Explore yoga and guided meditation to relax. Think nothing much of it. I need to relax. Take class for 6 months. Meet some backpackers and tourists. Last meditation lasts longer, and the instructor uses Tibetan bells for deep healing. Feel like I'm falling asleep, but I feel fully conscious. Feel a lightness I can't describe. Not floating, but burdens, and my bodily weight no longer weighing me down. I turn and can see everyone in the yoga studio below me. WTF is this shit.jpg. Still don't feel alarmed. Lightness carries me above and through the studio, into the darkness. Feels like I'm floating away from the earth. Clouds pass below my feet, and the planet gets smaller and smaller. It feels like forever. I climb outside of our solar system. It's but a speck below my feet. Keep climbing until there are no longer stars above me. Stars and other celestial bodies disappear. See emptiness around me. In the distance, I see a bright glowing light. As I approach, it takes shape. Looks like a golden coloured grey alien. Eyes are pure darkness with no reflections. It's sitting in a lotus position, feet folded up. Its hands are resting on its legs to the side, and fingers are extended out. Each finger seems to have a beam of golden light that looks like printed circuit board tracks that are equidistant from each other, but extends below out to a different galaxy. As I approach, I feel its eyes on me. I feel every atom in my body feeling watched and in control of its glare. I hear the words, "Not yet, you are not ready yet." It lifts a finger towards me. I feel a giant push and hurtle back to Earth, far faster than it took me to get to the being. I wake up, drenched in sweat. A friend next to me said I was asleep for minutes and he couldn't wake me up. WTF just happened. I head home and never talk about it again. So anon, WTF happened. Was it a dream? Any of you experienced something similar?
Real or imagined, I have bizarre sleep disorders and encounter this sort of thing regularly. Encountering what appear to be interdimensional beings in my sleep, which is very sporadic to say the least, and almost always in a lucid dream state. Yeah, it is weird, dude. It's the most bizarre experience to be fully conscious and just communicating with some other entity that entirely is its own person and has its own personality, which is consistent and tells you things that usually end up being accurate IRL, and there's no way you could know them. It's strange to think such things could potentially be manifestations of the mind after you experience them. But who knows?
I agree. It's confusing to just try and fathom another worldly being and interact with him without being physically presently, only consciously observing them.
I have just experienced another episode of sleep paralysis with auditory and visionary experiences. It was not purposefully induced and involved one of the scariest I've had recently. After tonight, I am off to the doc to find out what's going on. But before I do, I thought I'd share my latest experience with /x/ because truthfully, as a fully grown man, I am pathetically too scared to go back to sleep. I'm sitting here and actually jumping to the slightest noise heard in my silent house right now. So I end up in this dream state. I was asleep and not fully conscious in some state for around 40 minutes since I last remember checking my phone at the time. The reason for posting it here is to hear opinions on it, and because I have heard certain things mentioned in relation to the content and feelings experienced. Inside this episode, I was in my bed at home. I could see everything that was going on both in my dream and from above, like an out-of-body experience. I felt the most extreme pain I have ever felt on my back. It felt like scratching, but on a level I can only describe as if I had been ran over by a truck and dragged down the road at a high speed with my back against a rough surface. My deceased dog I could hear downstairs was barking in the background, and I was shouting, as loud as I could in pain. I could see and hear my son standing beside my bed whilst the whole thing happened, calling for me and being extremely concerned, but I could not regain consciousness for him or myself. Beside me was my girlfriend, but she was also asleep. No matter how loud I shouted, she would not wake up, so there was me and my body experiencing the dream. My son calling stood next to me while she lay heavily sleeping, and my dog, who we lost recently, barking aggressively downstairs. The whole time I was trying to shout, it was like my vocal cords had been cut, but it felt like if I tried hard enough I could force them to work. Eventually they did, and both my sleeping self and my out-of-body me could hear, I managed to turn at this point, from lying on my left side to the right. Then my girlfriend heavily laid her arm on my left shoulder. The sensation of this was enough to wake me up, and as I did, I was still shouting, but it was actually audible to her and myself. I sat straight up in bed and asked her if I just had a seizure. Not that I suffer from them, but have had experience of one before, but that's what it felt like. I was blind in my sleeping body and knew it. I could feel this horrible scratching sensation on my back, which would destroy any pain scale anywhere, and it felt like my vocal cords were cut, but I could not see a thing. My son wasn't there when I finally woke up. He is asleep in another room, but I can also hear him talking in his sleep, making noises and sudden movements. I heard my shouts of agony as I awoke, still speaking to them. I was shocked not to see my son standing there. It was clear somehow he was there but had disappeared with me waking up. I have no memory of my out-of-body experience now, just that I know there was the sleeping me and I was able to watch things play out from above whilst this happened. My girlfriend fell straight back asleep after, and I'm now exhausted trying to type this but scared to sleep in case it will happen again. I have experienced things like this since a young age, but in this one the fear is on another level, and they seem to be worsening. Usually within 2 weeks of having one of these episodes, something bad in life happens. Death has been the result of the last 2. Probably a coincidence. I have been running a sleep talk recorder app, but tonight I fell asleep without setting it on. Previously I have captured another voice on it, nothing like my own, and on 2 occasions. Everything feels strange right now in a worrying way. I can barely keep my eyes open now, so I will post later. Hopefully the thread will stay alive so I can try again if I fall asleep on it, but maybe I will come back to some informative replies when I wake up.
This sounds like a horrific, incredibly vivid dream about powerlessness and some kind of internal psychological suffering anon. I don't know if it was a real out-of-body experience. I've only had one of those, and it was just for a second. It's a lot easier to induce lucid dreams than it is to have an out-of-body experience, and it's usually a voluntary effort when you aren't actually dying.
You've hit the nail on the head. Powerlessness is certainly a big issue right now on so many levels, and the psychological suffering rings true, which could very well be the primary cause for it in the first place. It would be good if I could understand how to wake from one without the need of an outside stimulus. As for an out-of-body experience, I'm not really sure either. It has happened like that a good few times before, but defining it between a dream nightmare and that just being part of it to an OBE is difficult. As soon as you start to research yourself on such things, it brings up many related issues, but it doesn't seem to fit specifically into one category. I have done a sleep study before, but it was only for 3 nights and was inconclusive because happenings like this have come and go for years now. So to catch it with the sleep lab equipment at the time, I'd have to be wearing it every single night and being monitored until another occurrence happened, which wasn't viable. All was determined previously is that I have a different circadian rhythm to most, which is quite documented and common. I get trouble being tired, so I have to wait before I'm absolutely ready to sleep before even trying to, because if I don't, I get REM whilst awake, which does have an aspect of lucid dreaming or sleep paralysis as a probable cause due to this, but unfortunately this was only detected on the first night and seen as an anomaly or issue with the equipment because it didn't reproduce itself on the following 2 nights.
This sounds like bullshit. Whenever this happens to me, I can only see myself from the outside. It's kinda annoying if you are not sleeping face up because you feel like you are suffocating if your nose is on the pillow and you try to turn but you can't.
No way, it's bullshit, hence bringing it here for further opinion. That's what I couldn't understand and hope to find out why I can be experiencing both. All I can think of now is that the outer body bit is part of the dream, but still can't get my head around the aspect of having visions from both inside-outside, unless it was glitches in time in the dream. So I'm seeing and feeling the inner part and then also dreaming seconds later of viewing from above, if that makes sense. Skepticism is good. I'm listening to any explanation. but ultimately one with science around it and a provable theory will be the one which will most interest me. I was sleeping on my left side and rolled to my right when waking. I could still have had my face in the pillow to produce a suffocating feeling like that, though I agreed. When it happens to you, how do you wake yourself? Are you in a controlled lucid state or just roll with it kind of thing?
My out-of-body experience. True story. I get home late at night around 4 a.m. I'm very tired and go straight to my room and lay down. I don't know how long I have been laying down before I wake up and decide to get some water. As I get up and start walking towards, I look back and I see my body laying on the bed. My first reaction is that this is pretty cool, and decided I'm going to go grab something from another room and bring it next to my body to see if this was a dream or not. As I start walking down the hallway, I get this really cold chill down my back, as if something is telling me I need to get back to my body. I start freaking out as I make my way back to my room without grabbing anything. At this point, all I want to do is get up in my body because I'm definitely not dreaming right now. So I lay back down directly on top of my body. Now I can't move anything. I'm laying there, and I can't move a single muscle in my entire body. I begin to start freaking out even more now, and I am finally able to twitch my neck just a bit. At this point, my entire body feels like pins and needles, the feeling you get when your leg or arm falls asleep. I'm slowly able to regain movement in my hands and feet, and eventually the rest of my body. I get up, and there is absolutely no way I was dreaming. I have been fully awake since I first got out of my body. I told this story to a friend of mine, and she told me that if I wouldn't have turned back when I did for my body, that it is possible a demon could have entered my body and I would have been trapped essentially as a ghost. This ever happened to anyone else? Or can anyone explain what the hell happened?
Hello/X/. I come here from time to time to share my experiences. It has been a while since I last shared an experience. I have been focusing on other things. However, I had an experience last night that I found very interesting. I am going to write this down in as much detail as I can, as I always do. This is my experience. It is a genuine account of something I experienced this morning. I woke up at around 5 a.m. It was still dark outside. As I lay there recalling the dream that I had just had, I started to get the high pitch ringing in my ears and vibrations in my head. I lay in bed and just remained calm. As I lay there, I felt my consciousness becoming more fluid. Whatever this state is, that you can enter. You know you are there when you get the feeling of no gravity. As I floated up out of my bed, I could feel the butterflies in my stomach. I always get excited once I have managed to make a transition to this place without waking myself out of the trance. As I made my way through my house towards the backyard, I remembered that this time my goal was to go into my next-door neighbor's house. We live in a semi-detached house, aka a duplex. I went into my backyard floating over the fence, then back to the ground again, not paying too much attention to anything else other than getting inside our neighbor's house. You may be thinking, why would I do this? Usually I will just keep heading up into the abyss, but this time I thought, why not explore around my local area? I entered the back door of the neighbor's house and made my way to their kitchen. I started to look around at my surroundings. This is when I noticed a face on the wall that seemed to be sticking out of the wall. As I looked around the room, I could see this entity was stretched out like a spider web. He was hyper-colored, very detailed, and fun to look at. I motioned for him to come down. He retracted his web-like appearance and became an entity standing in front of me. After the initial meet and greet, which is done by an exchange of thoughts and emotions, he started to get all excited. I myself was excited because this entity I could see was willing to interact with me. I kind of said, let's do something. He motioned for me to watch what he did. This is when he expanded again over the walls, kind of like an octopus, then changing his color and patterns to match in with his surroundings. At this point, I didn't know why. He made the girl that lived in the house get up from her sleep and drink a glass of water. I could see him manipulating her actions through thought forms. I was standing in the kitchen watching my neighbor drink a glass of water, then he sort of motioned for me to try it. I can't explain exactly how he showed me, but it was an emotion or intention that I did or had. Then all of a sudden I was in this girl's head, as in I could read her thoughts and control her actions. At that point I was amazed at what I could do. I literally read her whole life from birth to that current point in time, just like that bing. I kind of looked or thought about the entity, and he sort of said, "Yep, that's it, now you got it." That's how it works. Apart from being amazed, I just witnessed someone's life in a flash, which I now still remember, as though it was something I experienced. He then motioned for me to control her. I made her have a shower, and me and the entity were spread out like spider webs on the walls of the bathroom. To be honest, I thought the experience at this point was hilarious. My excitement also excited this thing that was showing me how to do these things. In communications with him, he was kind of like, "Yeah, this is what I do, cool, huh?" He showed me how insignificant we are, as in, we are just a thought form being manipulated by something else for fun. The intention was given. That is why people have different emotions, because at any given time they might have more than one thing controlling them. I know this is not going to sit well with some readers, but I am just telling you what was exchanged to me. After a while, I became bored and asked him to show me something really cool, not of this world. Show me something I have not seen before. This is when he looked through my experiences in a flash. This thing was a hyper-intelligent being. He kind of reminded me of beings that I read about online that people encounter during DMT trips. I was saying, show me something scary. I bet you can't scare me. Remember, all of these communications are not in words, they are through thoughts. The entity and I then entered what you could call hyperspace. Flashing geometric patterns covered the tunnels and hyper-colored symbols, and all sorts of things like that happened. And the next thing I remember is just standing in this massive open space with these entities that were ginormous, as in me and the entity were ants to them. That was the difference in scale. It was kind of like a void or empty space these things were walking around in. Anyway, this is when this entity did his spiderweb thing and blended into his surroundings. Then there was just me standing at the foot of these entities. I could kind of hear the entity cackling that he had left me in that place. I started to walk around until these massive entities finally noticed I was there. I don't know how. I think it was because I was consciously trying to get their attention. I saw them all kind of walk to my location. Then one of them picked me up. They used their arms to lift me to the level at where their faces were. I was in the hands of this massive entity. I could see that 3 of them had gathered around. Their heads were almost impossible to describe, as anything is in these places. Just really big eyes, but also fierce-looking faces. They asked me what I was doing in that place, and I just kind of said looking around what else was there to do. They looked at me as if I was something so alien to anything they had seen before. They started to try and scare me by changing their faces into all these really weird creatures and patterns. I just watched. They were surprised that I was not scared. One of them indicated or asked why I did not fear them. I said, "What is there to fear? I am just here as you are. I can't stop you from doing anything to me. Do what you want." This is always a good mentality to have whilst in these places. To know you are at the mercy of the experience. They seemed pretty surprised with me in a kind of interesting way. They looked at where I was living my life currently, Earth, and kind of all laughed. At this point, they just dropped me and I entered hyperspace, and that was when the experience ended. I have tried to explain this the best I can. I did not make this story up. It is something I experienced just hours ago. I know these experiences are different to dream states, interactions, feelings, even visuals are all different. It is as if it is happening in real time. After this, I can see how entities feed or live on us or through us. We are literally under their control. This is why I don't believe in free will. We do not have free will. Every action seems to be promoted from these entities. They can jump in and out of you anytime. Read your whole life in an instant. The funny thing is, why can we do this too? Because I now know every memory that the lady next door has, just from merging with her being or thought for what seemed a long time. But in these places there is no time. Time stands still. TLDR, I wish I could show you what I just experienced.
I'm not sure what to call this. Astral travel, OBE, time slip, old hag syndrome, possession, abduction. I was in my early 30s and the early 2000s, kinda old for old hag, which is experienced primarily by much younger people. My wife and I were camping after a hard day of hiking and rock climbing in the Daniel Boone Natal Forest in Kentucky, old frontier and Civil War country. That night, we quickly fell asleep in our tent, as we were exhausted. Approximately 3 or 4 a.m., I was shocked by an incredibly vivid dream that burst into my dream vision. I was very aware that I was asleep and dreaming, thus technically lucid dreaming at that moment. I was also very aware of how I was oriented in my tent, where my wife lay asleep, how my tent was situated in my campsite, where the campfire was in general, which way was north, where my car was parked, where the park entrance road and ranger station were, the roadside ditches and underbrush, and the general geography of the nearby area. I could see it all, as if outside my body and tent and viewed from above our sleeping bodies. Then suddenly, the vision of the geography melted and morphed into what I instantly knew was the same place, but different in appearance. What I knew was this was the same place in a much earlier time. Looking back in hindsight, it could have been a future time. The campgrounds and roads were gone. What was currently thick woods and brush, roads and occasional structures were replaced with rolling hills, with occasional and scattered stands of trees. Very far off in the distance on a moonlit bald hillside, I could see two men glowing fuzzy white, bright enough to obscure any details of them, but I knew they were also not from here and now, the impression being a long time past. They were tiny at such a distance, but I knew them as men. Suddenly, my vision of them zoomed in so that I was face to face with them in a fraction of a second, as if I were unwillingly yanked across the distance to them, rather than them coming to me. They were both looking straight into my face at what seemed closer than normal conversational spacing. They both turned their glowing and indistinct faces and looked into the distance off to their left, my right. The illuminated man to my right raised a hand and pointed a finger in the direction they were looking, leaned in even closer to me and asked me, "Do you want to see a dead body?" indicating where he pointed. To say the very least, this was shockingly creepy. Almost instantly, I am again aware that I am again in my tent, still dreaming all this, I would guess. My vision now, however, was from my eye's normal point of view from where I lay on my back, not from outside of and above me as in the beginning. With my abrupt return to my current and actual location in my tent, I could see my chest, legs, and feet as I lay on my back from a normal point of view. However, there is another body glowing bright and fuzzy white, just as the men in the past distant hillside. This glowing body was taking great care to lay down and position himself precisely into mine, lying on my sleeping bag. Starting with the feet, legs, and pelvis, they seemed to merge into my body for a perfect matching fit. He then lay into me so that his left shoulder and arm merged into mine, then his chest into mine. I watched in horror as he placed and merged his remaining right arm and shoulder precisely onto mine, as I laid there utterly unable to move or protest. When the very last of him filled my body's form, I felt my body explode into a rigid spasm of body-wide contraction or convulsion. This was no longer anything that could be thought of as a dream. This was real. I was fully awake. My back was arched like a bridge with only my shoulders and neck and soles of my feet touching the ground. I wanted to scream, "Get out!" But my chest and lungs refused to expand and take the breath I needed to do so. I thought that if I could just get a breath, I could yell loud enough to break the spasm of contraction that had such a complete grip on me. I tried and succeeded to take many tiny sips of air until I had the breath that I needed to scream and break free of this terrifying convulsion and what felt like an invasion of my body. Funny thing is, this whole time, I was aware of my wife sleeping inches away, and that if I yelled, "Get out," that it would certainly frighten her, so I decided to yell, "Stop it," instead, and I did just that. That very instant, the entire event was over. No more body-wrenching spasm, no glowing form within me, just me and my wide-eyed wife bolt upright beside me. It was over. I insisted that she lay in physical contact with me for the rest of the early morning. I refused to allow myself to go to sleep until I could see the orange glow to the east that was soon to rise, morning sun. For the next 3 days, my body was racked with sore muscles, especially my torso, as if I had done 1,000,000 crunches and push-ups. My voice was basically gone for a few days from the forceful scream before it came back hoarse and scratchy. I never went back to that part of the national forest.
So while I was trying to OBE, or astral project, consciously, I had a few nightmares, which I then concluded were actually unconscious astral projections. Hear me out, that you know how our astral body is made of energy. Well, keep that in mind and read. Be me 15 or so, trying to have an OBE before going to sleep every day for the past 3 weeks. Not giving up. Want to see awesome shit. Eventually wake up This is not my house, not my city, not my planet. Start walking through a path of pink sand and rivers with clear brownish waters. Eventually, I realize I'm actually lost. Then I see a dude on a boat alongside this river. He takes me around, and we chat for hours. He wears white robes and is in general a bro, but I can't remember much of what we talked. Then he takes me to a place similar to where I started, but there are pillars of granite or quartz coming out of the ground, the same pinkish sands. But there is fire pits and holes in the ground that seem to have no end. I keep walking for some time, and then I see a shadow. A humanoid being made of something black, and this thing attacks me. We fight hand to hand for hours. We can move freely, fly, jump high, etc. Eventually manage to throw it into one of those pits with fire. Doesn't come out. Cool. I know more things happened, but I can't really remember much, other than giant things in the river and stuff. When I woke up, I felt like someone had stomped on me all night. I was tired as shit. After doing some investigation, it seems that when an entity attacks your astral body, it can damage it, and you feel like shit when that happens because you are basically half naked in this reality. Cool, huh? I met Caronte, Charon, the ferryman of Hades.
I've been getting really into Robert A. Monroe's books recently. I've also begun getting curious about OBEs as well as astral projection. I've had a few intriguing personal experiences that give some validity to these ideas for me. But the reason I'm creating this thread is because of the dream that I had 2 nights ago. I fall asleep around 10 o'clock, which is pretty early for me. I'm a night owl whenever I can manage. Immediate realization that I am aware and lucid while also being asleep. I'm already looking up at the ceiling, but I start to see sparks and warps in the geometry of my popcorn ceiling above me, feel an overwhelming pressure gathering above my body. Suddenly all I see is this pattern? Geometric fractals, impossible colors, they all start to rotate together to form a toroidal ring above my bed. Get warp speed launched out of my body into a black and white checkerboard tunnel. Tunnel slowly pulsates and rotates as I start to walk through it. Out of nowhere, a Jester appears beside me, speaks. "You lost, pal?" Kinda half nod, more focused on the absurd beauty of the shapes and the impossible colors. The Jester notices my wandering eyes and half smiles. His teeth are a bit too big for his head. "Well, I'll leave you to it. Just don't forget to go back. I'm not coming back for you." Jester dissolves into various fractal particles and impossible colors. Look around the tunnel for what feels like a few minutes. Start to see faces in my peripheral vision. There's at least several dozen of these faces swimming around my field of view, but it's like they're covered in a thin sheet so that you can only make out their facial features without any specific detailing. Decide it's time to go. Immediately catapult at light speed back into my bed. Wake up, I've seen a lot of threads about the Jester entities prowling around the ether, so I figured I'd share my experience to add to the mystery.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check the Odyssey and Rumble pages for separate archives of previous broadcasts.